Well, welcome everyone. It is Friday. Is this the second Friday? It is Fridays for Future. Here we are, making it happen as usual, the Kamzoo Climate Crisis Coalition. I have just a couple quick announcements, and then we'll do our round robin. And today we have with us Lori Evesque of Natural Cycles Farm to talk to us. So probably the biggest announcements. Let's see, so the county campaign is moving forward. Our folks in Ostramo, as you know, passed a climate emergency declaration, and we think our next step with that group of constituents will be to start pushing for the climate coordinator position. This again is an idea for a county-wide position that would bring together all of the different local governments and groups planning and making climate action plans and serve as a clearinghouse and overall resource for those. The Kamzoo Township Climate Committee, Nikki is on that with me, many of us are on. We are, I don't know, Nikki, I don't know what word you would use. I would say we are steadfastly writing a climate action plan together. And it is really interesting to see the different pieces that come up as hurdles. And so we're in quite an interesting conversation right now, for example, about an electric vehicle purchase policy. And thanks to our friends at Kamzoo Electric Vehicle Association are going to come and give some of the background and science and the understanding of why and how we could be utilizing those vehicles for police and fire and township vehicles overall. So that's very interesting. And I see Tom Hackley is on here. Tom has been leading the charge out in Texas Township. I know we've got a couple residents from Texas Township are going to be helping him out. I think we're still on track to go to their working group board on March 28th. And then I just convinced Rick Fryman that he should add about 8 to 10 of our folks that live in Portage to some of the efforts that are going on in the city of Portage and moving forward their environment and climate goals as well. So little things are happening all over the place, and eventually we will bring them all together. From my end of the world, our next, for the Climate Change Working Group and the Kamzoo Climate Crisis Coalition, you all should of course be aware that Amitav Ghosh, Western Michigan University is bringing Ghosh virtually to campus on April 12th. We have a book club that April 12th that is going to be with Ghosh. He's going to be, I'm going to put the link in the chat there. He's going to be there. I'm going to moderate, facilitate guided questions, and then we'll have time to open it up to the Q&A. Please register. This is a bookstore, and BookBug is going to be hosting that Zoom. So it is not the same Zoom link as regular book club, folks. All right. So don't go to my link that's in your calendar. Do go to BookBug and register so that you can make sure that you get in there. And I think we're trying to limit that to like 60 participants. So you're getting the preview before my giant email comes out to everybody Tuesday. Please get in there and register so you make sure you have a seat at book club on Tuesday, April 12th, same time, 5:30. And then right after book club that same evening, and I'll put the link in there as well, will be a public lecture, and that'll be a webinar style, right? And so, you know, everyone should be able to get in. We through WebEx, not Zoom, from Western Michigan University's Ethics Center will be hosting that. That'll be at 7 p.m. that evening. And our very own Dr. Ron Kramer is going to facilitate that discussion. So I hope that everyone has those events on their calendars and that you are really looking forward to this wonderful discussion that's going to be able to happen in our community. Okay, other announcements, any other things going on? Somebody just asked, we all believe that the styrofoam recycling is happening in the last Saturday of April. We all think that is still a go, but I don't know beyond that if it will be continued as a program. If anyone has more information, I'd be happy to hear it right now. Okay, other announcements, stuff that's going on?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Portage is having its annual Green-a-thon on May 1st. And it's kind of a loose project, but I'm mentioning this because I'd like to inspire some people to organizations to possibly contribute to it or sign up to promote climate type topics. And I'm recently on a kick about electrifying everything. So things that might relate to electrification of buildings and transportation. If you're have an organization, or you just want to create an organization for this purpose, get there, and so that people can see you, we can spread the word. There's a form on the city clerk's website for the city of Portage, where you can sign up under the title of Green-a-thon.
Thank you. KCCC, we will sign up. We will be there. And I should have also announced it. Is it May 3rd or May 7th, Donna? Mode Shift is having an event in Bronson Park around transportation as well. And I should have also announced April 30th community celebration for Tom Small will be out at the Kamzoo Nature Center. You just got an email from me about that yesterday with Donna's wonderful graphics on that one. What else am I missing? Mary Ann?
Well, tomorrow's the second Saturday of the month, and since I don't see Tim here, I'll make the announcement. It's Citizens Climate Lobby Day. At noon, the Western chapter meets. At 1 o'clock is the national call, and the speaker will be from Yale's Climate Communication Program. And as soon as that's over, the Kalamazoo and St. Joseph chapters have a joint meeting. You're all welcome to come and bring friends.
How do we get there?
There are Zoom links, and send me an email if you haven't already gotten one from me with a Zoom link for each of those.
And what's your email address?
mariannrenz47@gmail.com. There's no E in Ann, and Renz is spelled R-E-N-Z.
Maybe I'll try to throw it in the chat later. It's almost like you guys had that routine worked out in advance.
But he asks good questions.
He does. It's like he knows. Any other things going on? And I should also note, thank you, Marianne, just booked. I'm so excited. I know you all are too, when the new farmers market is able to open this season. Thank you so much, Marianne, for not only booking for CCL, but you're going to allow KCCC on the third Saturdays. Is that still true?
Yes. So
Join us.
KCCC needs to fill out its own form. And it's the third Saturday of every month, but November when I asked for the first Saturday, and June when I asked for the first and third Saturdays.
Wonderful. So we hope to see you at the farmers market over the course of this summer as well. Stop by and say hello, or I'll be asking you to hopefully volunteer for some shifts so that you too can represent the coalition out at these events. All right, folks, anything else? I'm going to turn things over to our communications chair, Donna, to introduce our speaker for today.
Hi, everyone. It's really good to see you all, and in particular, people that have not previously joined us. I'm guessing some of you newbies are aspiring or maybe already weavers. It's really good to see you. So I'm thrilled to welcome Lori Evesque here with us today. And I was reflecting on this introduction back to December of 2007, which is when I first met Lori. I was getting involved in the local food movement, and somebody, I think it might have been Chris Dilly at the co-op, said that Lori was somebody that I needed to know, which is kind of an understatement. And anyway, I went to her farm, and which at the time was in Matawan, I think, or Pawpaw, actually. Pawpaw. Anyway, it was the first time that I had ever touched a chicken, a hen, a live hen, and I was smitten. And it would probably another word for it was obsessed and bound and determined to get my own chickens. That was sort of the outcome, one of the outcomes of that gathering. And I did get chickens finally. I still have them in 2016. It took me a while. And one of the things that I remember, and Lori and I have done things on and off since then, which has really been lovely. And one of the things that I remember her saying back then is that she longed to be a sheep farmer. And here she is, a sheep farmer, and so much more. So let me just read a few highlights from her bio. Lori is a farmer, a co-shepherd, and caretaker of a 36-acre pasture and vegetable farm in southern Allegan County. Lori and her partner Pete have a flock of mixed breed sheep for wool and meat, a few Jersey steers for beef, chickens for eggs and meat, And I will say that she took 2 of my roosters for me. Thank you, Lori. And turkeys and geese. All the animals contribute manure to improve the fertility of the farm, which is certified naturally grown, which is a farmer verification organic verification program. Lori, in partnership with some small scale wool mills in Michigan, processes the wool from sheep into wool for spinners, knitters, and weavers. She also spins, knits, weaves, and crochets the wool into garments and household items for her and Pete, and they sell at the Kalamazoo Farmers Market. And I got a hat last year, which is wonderful, a little blue hat. I wear it all the time. Anyway, she and Pete use holistic methods on their farm to support the life on, under, and in the soil, which is just gorgeous. Anyway, I'll turn it over to Lori in just a second, but just want to close, or before I turn it over, saying that Lori's going to share with us the impact of textiles on the environment and climate in particular, and ways that you can reduce your impact through the choices that you make. So with that, I'll just ask folks if you have any questions to place them in the chat. We've left plenty of time at the end for a Q&A. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and mute and turn it over to Lori. And I think, Denise, you are doing the PowerPoint, right?
Yep, you want me to go ahead and share that?
Yes, please.
All right. We should be off and running.
Yep, I can see it. Okay, local fiber, local resilience. So I have this caveman up in the corner because so often when people talk about changing their lives, whether it's reducing the energy they use, going to more local food, or especially something like clothing, people have this idea that we're going to be returning to the Stone Age because God forbid we stop the train of progress and look at doing something different. But all of you are, I'm sure of the opinion that things can't go on the way we are and things have to change. So we are expanding our idea of relocalizing to more than just food. We have to obviously have something to wear, and textiles are used in every part of our lives. Okay, next slide. So I've been involved in local food for what seems like forever. Started growing food in the 80s, was involved in local food ever since I moved here in the early 90s. For those of you who've been around for a long time, my first experience with co-ops was with the Grain Dance Food Co-op in Paw Paw. That closed in the early 2000s, and then I was involved with PFC, with Fair Food Matters. I was long involved with the Community Harvest Fest, which was out at Tillers International, and I worked at Tillers. I also have been a student of collapse and peak oil and other issues for many years. And through all of that, I've wondered why it was that people concentrate on food. Yes, we eat food every day and we can't survive without food, but we can't really survive without textiles either. Thus the caveman wearing skins in the first slide. So that's always been in the background of what I have thought about. And it links in with my life as a fiber person, as a fiber artist, which started when I was about 8 years old. Next slide. So this is a picture of me in my fiber studio, which is where I'm sitting in right now. And I am literally surrounded by fibers of all kinds. The door to the fiber studio and the rest of the house has not done much to stop my fiber from being pretty much everywhere. I learned to knit when I was about 8. I remember learning from an aunt who really wasn't very much of a knitter, and I think I got a little Barbie scarf about 1 inch wide. And from then on, I was really hooked, and I have become not prolific, but I'm a proficient knitter. This sweater I'm wearing, I knit, and this cowl, and I'll show a few things later on as well that I knit. I taught myself how to crochet, and do you remember seeing like little doilies that older people used to have in their houses? I taught myself how to do that, and I've been a prolific seamstress, and I'm a weaver and a dyer using mostly natural dyes and a spinner. So I have been immersed in fiber for a long time. I made most of my clothes during my teenage and early adult years. I also now raise sheep, as Donna mentioned, and I can remember when I was talking to her and talking about how I really wanted to have sheep. And at the time, the partner that I had, my ex-husband, he was absolutely thrilled when I got the job at Tiller's International, because they had sheep, and maybe that would stop me from wanting to have sheep of my own. Well, years go by, and we're no longer partners. We're no longer married, and I have a new partner. Some of you may have seen us at the farmers market. Pete Robertson and I are co-shepherds and caretakers of this land, and we are really serious about our role as caretakers. And back to the textiles, the sheep that I raise are a broad range of different sheep breeds. I have a breed called Tunis, which is it has medium soft wool. I think everybody in the world might think about merino as the only type of sheep breed, but that's not the case. There's lots of different sheep breeds, and they've all been around for different purposes. And Tunis is it's a great outerwear, sweaters, hats, gloves, socks type of wool, not necessarily always next to the skin and soft. And I have other breeds that are much softer and have had them since 2017, and absolutely am still in love with sheep. So next slide. Enough about me, and I will share a whole lot, probably more about me as we go on. But if we're going to talk about relocalizing fibers and textiles, we first have to get a better idea of what's wrong with the current globalized fiber shed that we have. One of the big things is just the sheer volume of textiles that are produced every year. There are about 238 billion pounds of textiles produced every single year. And of that, 178 billion pounds are man-made fibers. Now, in the resource that I found, it didn't go into details about exactly how they define man-made textiles. If you look at just the polyester and the nylon and the acrylic and those types of textiles, if that's the definition of man-made, then part of that, the difference between the 238 billion and the 178 billion might also be things like rayon, which is produced from wood chips, and bamboo fibers and other fibers like that, which personally I still consider those as man-made, because the process that they have to go through to become an actual fiber is chemical dependent. It's a high energy use process. So all in all, the global production of man-made fibers is enormous. And if most of those fibers that are man-made come from fossil fuels, remember that is a non-renewable resource. And globally, we've passed the point of, we've passed peak for conventional oil and are now using oil that is much more expensive, more difficult to process, more difficult to get out of the ground. So just that impact is tremendous. The textile industry as a whole is the second greatest polluter on the planet after the oil and gas industries. So that's to me, the fact that very few people really talk about that is appalling, because we have a lot of focus on what we eat and giving up meat and doing all sorts of taking little bites out of our impact on the planet, when the textile industry has a huge impact, and it's something that needs to have more attention paid to it, and also more options for everybody to make different choices. So some of the ways that the textile industry impacts the environment. The top picture that I show in this is a picture of the water supply for some people. I think this might be in the Philippines. So the United States and other countries of our position in the world, I hate the word first world countries or developed countries, but we have prided ourselves on reducing our impact. But what we've done is we've sent it somewhere else. We've sent the pollution to other parts of the world. We've sent the poor labor practices. We've sent it all someplace else. So there's this idea that out of sight, out of mind. And we pride ourselves on cleaner rivers and things like that, whereas we're putting that burden on other people, and there needs to be recourse back to us. The herbicides and pesticides used in cotton production. Now, cotton is obviously part of the volume of textiles that are not considered man-made, but something like at least 95 to 98% of the cotton produced in the world is genetically modified cotton, which allows for the application of huge amounts of herbicides and pesticides on that product. And that affects not only the farmers that are working in the fields and the organisms, microorganisms, and the health of the soil itself, and every part of the environment that's connected with it. But as a fiber artist, personally, if I'm going to be weaving something, I tend to buy organic cotton because of my belief in the detrimental impacts of GMO cotton and non-organic cotton. But also I know a lot of weavers who have been around in weaving for decades, and they are constantly saying that the quality of the cotton that is produced now is really, really poor. So we may have traded the ability to spray herbicides and pesticides on the cotton, but the other impact of it is that we're also producing lower quality cotton, which feeds into the idea of fast fashion. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that term, but the changeover in the styles that are available in the stores has sped up. Right now, if you go into a store today and find something that you are thinking of getting and decide, maybe I'll wait a week, 9 times out of 10, the next week that you go in, not only is that style no longer on the sale, on the regular racks, it's not even on the sale racks because they get new stuff in every single week. And that built-in obsolescence that is an integral part of the fashion industry has contributed to one of the other major impacts of our global fiber shed on the environment. So I don't know about you, but probably every year I try to go through my closets and get rid of some of the things that I don't wear anymore. It's not always because it doesn't fit or it's worn out or anything like that, but
Good afternoon, Kalamazoo Valley Museum. May I help you?
Liz, you need to mute yourself. It's not because we don't like the clothes anymore. We just might be tired of them. So we put together a box that's going to go to Goodwill or Salvation Army or one of the other used clothing purveyors around us. And that makes us feel better about not wanting those clothes again. Well, I knew the number was enormous, but 83% or about 11.3 million tons of those donated textiles end up in the landfill. Now, I'm sure all of you have seen pictures from Africa or South America or Asia where we see people wearing t-shirts or sweatshirts with the names of US sports teams or other products that a lot of the people who are wearing them don't necessarily have any connection to. So part of the 17% of the donated textiles that don't end up in landfills do make it to somebody's wardrobe, whether it's in places in overseas or whether it's places here. That's really good. But the fact that so much of that ends up in landfills is a clear indication that the average person in this country and other countries like us really purchases and discards way more clothing and other textiles than we really need to have bought in the first place. And the average piece of clothing, once it's in a landfill, even if it's 100% natural fiber, is not going to break down. Or if it does break down, it's going to contribute to the methane that's produced by the average landfill. Based on, okay, if you look at the second picture I have on the page, that doesn't look like a landfill, but it is a dump of some sort. Some of those fibers will be, or many of those fibers will be man-made fibers. And one thing that man-made fibers do as they go through the wash and wear out is that they break down into microfibers. And there's been increasing research done to show that those microfibers are detrimental to not only the environment in general, but creatures from microscopic to macroscopic. And once it gets into their body, it affects how their bodies work, and it's causing tremendous issues. One of the final impacts that I want to talk about briefly are the social impacts of the global fiber shed and how we've given up on our responsibility as citizens of this planet. Are the social impacts, whether it's poor labor conditions, child labor, low wages, sexual abuse, being forced to work in conditions where nobody really should. The social impacts of the current fiber textile industry are appalling. And there's, unlike the food system, we don't have very many, I've not seen many options like the fair trade food in the textile industry. So if you put all of that together, there are a lot of issues with the textile industry and our global fiber shed that really need to be addressed and changed. Next slide. So, back when I was looking into local food, one of the biggest hurdles to redeveloping a local food shed was a lot of the infrastructure that we've lost, whether it's local butcher shops, just the sheer number of local farmers producing food that we can actually eat, the small scale producers of value added products, the ease at which those products can get on supermarket shelves. All of those point to a lot of the blank spaces in the local food system infrastructure. Well, we have that as well with the textile industry, and probably to a greater extent because it's so under the radar. So we've lost production capacity. We grow a lot of cotton, but we don't grow anywhere near what we would need to grow in order to be able to get rid of the fossil fuel based products, textiles. We probably have about a third the number of sheep in this country that we used to. Not only that, but a lot of the farmers who raise sheep for meat end up throwing out the fiber that they produce, or they raise hair sheep. The average, I'm on a sheep farmers Facebook page, and I don't think a week goes by when I don't see a farmer asking, what does everybody do with their wool? And most people just throw it out, or they let the shearer take it. But the shearer, when they sell it, gets like pennies per pound for that wool. And so we don't have the infrastructure to make it worthwhile for wool farmers, sheep farmers, to process that wool. We don't have the fiber processing infrastructure, whether it's the scouring of the wool or the cotton. We don't have, which is the washing of it, the spinning and the weaving and the knitting, the whole production into finished products. We don't have. Back up a bit to some of the other fibers that we have up, that I have listed. Flax growing, it used to be done quite a bit in the northern tier states of the United States, as well as in Canada, in Minnesota and North and South Dakota and Montana. That's all been given over to other commodity crops. A few years ago, when hemp growing became possible and it grew tremendously, I was really excited about the possibility that maybe we're going to actually produce it as a fiber, because it's an incredibly versatile, and it's can be grown without herbicides and pesticides, which is something that I find really important. And we also don't have the skills. We don't have skills to do the spinning, the weaving, and the knitting from a consumer level to a manufacturing level. Now we do have if any of you have ever been out to the Michigan Fiber Fest at the Allegan Fairgrounds, the third week of August, you will appreciate that there are people who still do the spinning, the weaving, the knitting, but it's barely at a cottage industry level. I'd be surprised if you take a random sampling of people in the Kalamazoo area, if more than 10% of people actually know how to spin, knit, weave, or anything like that. So we need to do something about the infrastructure. Next slide. So what can we do? I used the term fiber shed a bit earlier, and that's a takeoff of the idea of a food shed. And it was coined about 10 to 15 years ago by a woman by the name of Rebecca Burgess, who was a fiber artist out in California. And she decided she needed to do something about the lack of a real fiber shed. So definition of a fiber shed is a geographical landscape that defines and gives boundaries to a natural textile resource base. So that's what we're talking about. A regional resource base for fibers. And awareness of this bioregional designation engenders appreciation, connectivity, and sensitivity for the life-giving resources within our homelands. So that's very close to a food shed, and it does need to be because it's also land-based and agriculture-based. So it's a network of farmers, ranchers, land managers, designers, ecologists, sewers, knitters, felters, natural dyers, spinners, mill operators, etc. And I would add to that consumers. Just like a local food shed should have the input of every single person who eats, thus the fiber shed should have the input and buy-in of every person who uses textiles, which is 100% of us. Next slide. Okay, how can individuals start? Okay, this is a picture of some of my sheep, the picture at the top. They spend their year harvesting my grass and building wool, which they allow me to give them a haircut once a year, and then I make things out of them. Picture at the bottom is from when I was involved in Viking reenactments, and we dressed up and practiced skills of the Viking era. And here I'm using an Inca loom, making a belt. But that was a time, and that time lasted probably until about early in the 1900s or 1900s, where pretty much everybody had the skills to do at least something. So on the resource page, I have a link from fibershed.org, which gives a challenge for everyone. It's a 7-day challenge just to start thinking about where your textiles come from and how you can change your impact. But to just sum it up a little bit, first of all, in order to change, just like understanding the environmental impacts of the entire textile system, it's good to know what your impact is. So look through your clothes and look at the labels. How much of them are made of synthetic fibers? How much, if any, are actually natural fibers? When you decide to get something new to you, maybe first look at some of the used clothing options. If you have to buy new, make sure you get it high quality and get something that's going to last. One of the second and most important things is learn how to mend, repair, and repurpose your clothes. So here I have this little tool, which is called a darning egg. And instead of throwing out your socks as soon as you get a hole in them, and I don't know about you, but every single merino sock pair I have produced holes very quickly. Learn how to darn the socks and repair them. And if you don't know how to do it, find somebody who does, and be really sweet with them and maybe give them something nice and see if they'll darn your socks. Another thing is that with the mending is that it's really becoming more and more, yeah, a light bulb is a great place instead of the egg. I'm always just afraid that it's going to break. So another thing that's getting more popular is when you learn to mend, don't be afraid to make it very visible. So this is a pair of jeans that I repaired, and I've made a bit of an artwork out of it, and I'm not trying to hide the fact that it's been repaired. So learning how to repair your clothes is vitally important. Learn more about natural fibers. As I said earlier, not all wool has to be merino. There are lots of other breeds that have better fiber for different uses. Okay, here's a pair of socks that I made. They're not quite finished because I have ends sticking out, but this is not merino. It's I can't remember what type of wool it is, but it's a type of wool that's going to wear better, and it's not going to I'm not going to have to fix the heels really quickly. This is probably, if you learn how to knit, this probably isn't going to be the first thing that you learn, but it's a great skill to have. Learn a new skill, learn how to make textiles for your home, your family, and stuff. And with food, I think the biggest thing is awareness. In the past, when I've been talking about food and then change the subject and start talking about textiles, most people have never even thought about the source of their textiles. And just like when I was first learning about local food, you look at your pantry and you wonder, okay, where can I begin? When I first moved to organic food and then to local food, the first thing I did is I picked one thing to not buy conventionally. And then as you get used to purchasing that one thing, you can expand what you're buying to. When it comes to fibers, look for more natural fibers, buy things that are going to last, learn how to make your own clothing and other things. And one of the things that I've seen before and have been toying with the idea of doing is starting. One of the things that a lot of the fiber sheds groups around the country are doing is that they're starting to do like they'll put on a clothing swap session so that you can, if you've got things that you don't want to wear anymore but are perfectly good and you want to make sure that actually gets used instead of ends up in the landfill. You can come and then just trade clothing with other people. You could have mending sessions where people are taught to how to, for example, darn socks and stuff like that. I've been toying with the idea of starting some of those. And if there's interest, I'd be willing to look at it. Next slide. If you want to purchase rather than make, what are some clothing options? I will come up with a few. There are several who produce organic clothing and more fair trade like clothing. And unfortunately, a lot of those styles are, because everything, a lot of that clothing is more expensive. It seems to have gone so that you first get the people who have lots of disposable income before it moves down to the people who just need clothes for every day. So I will spend some time looking for some brands of clothing that are a little bit better from an environmental standpoint. But here are a few resources that can get you started. The first is a link to the Fiber Shed organization. And then the next one is the Slow Fashion Challenge. It goes into a little bit more detail, some of the things that I have talked about. Number 2 is a book by Rebecca Burgess that goes into a little bit more detail of her journey creating a local fiber shed, and the Northern California fiber shed is the original one, and it's the most well developed, and they have been able to support a couple mills that are producing high quality, locally raised wool and cotton fibers. So that's good to get a whole lot of a background and also to get an idea of what the scope of the issue is. Mending Matters is a book that goes into some of the ways that you can repair your clothes. Come out to Michigan Fiber Festival. There's a lot of opportunities to learn new skills. And also, if you're interested in weaving, the Weavers Guild of Kalamazoo is a great resource. Rick, I definitely think it should be part of the permaculture movement, because we can't just say we're not going to buy clothing made from fossil fuels. There's got to be some alternative, and animals on the land are exactly what we need to repair that land. And also if there's a lot of some interest in learning more as far as having some sessions on learning how to darn or anything like that, I may be very much interested in putting some of those things together. And that's basically all I have. And I would love to answer some questions that people might have. And yeah.
Yay. First of all, let's give you a round of applause. Thank you for that fantastic presentation. You covered a lot of ground. Since I was sharing screen, I wasn't able to keep up with the chat. Donna, have you been keeping up with the chat? It seems like a couple questions might have gotten answered.
Yeah, I do have a few here because I know Lori answered several on the way here. So early on, I think there was a question about the, hold on, I'll get to it. Lori, I think this was your first slide. And what kind of pollution is textile second largest? Maybe Tom can clarify that question, or maybe Lori, you understand it.
All I found was that as a cumulative polluter, the textile industry is second only to oil and gas. And some of that is going to be from the very nature of the man-made textiles are tied up into the fossil fuel industry anyway. There are a lot of chemicals used in processing textiles, and that's actually regardless of whether it's a man-made textile or a natural textile. If you've got, a lot of people will say that they're allergic to wool, and while there are some allergies to lanolin and stuff, the caustic chemicals that are used to basically get all the vegetable matter, all the bits of hay and things like that out of the fiber can cause a lot of reactions for people. And the picture that I showed there's a tremendous amount of water pollution due to the textile industry, especially with the dyes, that a lot of the dyes are really have high concentrations of heavy metals and other toxic chemicals involved in them. So I didn't really go into the details of how exactly in what ways the textile industry is a polluter beyond things like the herbicides and pesticides used in growing cotton and the dyes that are used.
Lori, can you tell us a little bit? We still have 6 minutes left, and there's some really good posts that people made about websites, which I will share on our Facebook, the Coalition's Facebook page after we download this video. And so just a quick question. You use natural dyes, right? Like marigolds and other things. Can you share us a little bit about that?
The natural dyes I use include quite a number of flowers that I grow here, coreopsis and marigold. Everybody around here is familiar with goldenrod that grows wild all around. Those are 3 common dyes that I use. I grow Japanese indigo, which can be grown as an annual here, and that gives me the blue colors, and with the yellows from the flowers I can get a broad range of greens. One of the more difficult ones to raise here are getting the reds and the purples, and I do purchase cochineal bugs from some dye suppliers, which come from a small scale insect that lives on cactuses from the southwest of the US down through Central and Southern South America. There's one dye that's been used for thousands and thousands of years called madder, and the root of that is used to get reds. And I have started growing that, but have not gotten enough really to use. One of the things that people will come back with about natural dyes is that they do require what's called a mordant, and a mordant is a chemical, often a metal salt, that basically is a handshake between the dye and the fiber. And most natural dyes require that mordant. It used to be that that a lot of both in concentration and quantity of these mordants were used in order to use the natural dyes, and those included chrome, which is highly toxic, and that's rarely used anymore as a mordant. Tin, copper, and iron are also common mordants. I use all 3 of those in order to get the range of colors that I use. But my most common mordant is potassium alum, which is a baking ingredient. So it is possible to reduce even further the impact of the dyes by using different mordants.
So just looking through here, there's a couple comments. Nancy Kelmy says she has 2 sheep and spins, knits, and weaves their fiber. And Allison Geis wanted to thank you. She had to scoot too. Can you close us out by telling us how your sheep tolerate the once a year shearing?
Well, so there is a lot of controversy about sharing, and I will say that a lot of the controversy is created by organizations like PETA that really don't want us to be using having domesticated animals at all. Modern sheep are not like the wild ancestor of sheep. We have developed them such that most of them don't shed their fiber in the spring when it starts getting warm. So we basically have to give them a haircut every year. And they tolerate the shearing very well. If you've got a very experienced shearer, it looks like when they're doing the shearing that they're all contorted and twisted, but I think they, in their animal way, appreciate the shearing once they've got the mass of fiber taken off them. They probably would prefer, given the chance, to wait until it's a little bit warmer. I actually have my shearing on Monday, and I think it's supposed to be 56, but currently it's pretty cool. And they do, their reaction to being shorn is to, especially if it's cold, is to eat more. And they tolerate it really well. So
I think we
Thank
might.
you. Oh, sorry, Denise, go ahead.
I think we answered all the questions. There's some great links in the chat too that everyone is putting in there. And if we're gonna, I think, did we answer really Rick's question? If we have to purchase, you know, we can go to you, right?
I know of some more ethical clothing manufacturers, suppliers, and I will put together a list and share it with you. As I said, it's very difficult because you're balancing that supply versus demand, and also the increased price of ethically produced clothing, where you're minimizing your damage to the environment, and you're also treating the people in the whole supply line ethically and giving them remuneration that actually allows them to live a decent life. So the clothes tend to be more expensive, but we also used to be a culture that bought clothes to last. And I think we have to definitely look at that a whole lot more as well. But I'll find a few options, at least to give people an idea of what there is out there.
Yeah, I think that would be incredibly useful. We can, if you're willing, we can share that on the website even, and give folks a resource to be able to go to. In your honor today, Lori, this is my mother's sweater that I am wearing today. I did intentionally think about you and this talk this morning. I can't go out without saying, Marianne, thank you for the pun on the darn group that we could start. If you didn't see that in the chat, that's a good one. And you know, many of us grew up this way, and I grew up with the sewing circles, and it's a little sexist, but of course my father called those stitch and bitch. And so I would be happy to also host a stitch and bitch anytime and we're recording. So now everyone knows how I grew up. So I think those are all really fantastic suggestions that bring us back to that community and local focus. And I just loved how you did the slow fashion with the slow food. There's so many parallels, but you really helped me think about it in new ways. And the Western students have done some clothing swaps too. So I'd love to see if we can expand some things like that. So
and I just want to add, so what? Like SEW, but SOW. So what is a party that I always attend at my family reunion, and to bring something and add to the quilt for our family. And Lori, I appreciate you. And I put something in the chat because the Friday of Earth Week, I'm getting the details together. You guys in this circle, please grab an item in your closet so that we can put the KCCC logo on it. And I'm working out the details, Denise. I've spoken with Donna and a few people. Trust me, it will be a success. I just need to iron out a few things, but mark your calendars for Friday, April 22nd from 1 to 3, and I'll give you the details on the location.
Cool.
And
Fantastic.
Lori, I hope you come.
I will put it on my calendar.
Thread up. Everybody's coming up with names now. We're gonna get creative on this. We're gonna get, that'll be the goal of the first meeting. Is what we should call ourselves. Well, everyone, let's give Lori another round of applause here. Thank you so much. That was really, really well done. I can't wait to share this out with all these wonderful resources to our community.
Cool.